Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune, in a exciting Epic 7 video. It's gonna be about some changes that have happened in the game that I feel have shooken up how we play, what we think about the game. So we can go over about 10 things, not really in any particular order, but as we get further down the list, I do feel like the changes might have been a little more impactful overall. Before we get into the list though, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe, and comment. But let's get into it. We're gonna try to avoid things like power updates. So something like, say, Wyvern 11, right? Or 12 and 13 coming out. All that really did was it just changed, how strong we are. Or things like new Abyss floors popping up, right? All this did was it just kind of changed how strong we had to be to clear this, right? So, and we're not going to talk about every single nerf and buff, obviously, but we will talk about a few of them. And that's what number 10 is going to be. It's going to be some of the most impactful buffs and nerfs the game has ever had. So, this will be in 2 sections. So there will be another bunch of nerfs or buffs a little bit later on in the list as a spoiler. But as a preview, here's some of the ones for the first one, just in case people weren't around for when these happened. So, at the very start of the game, there was something that people used to call the Holy Trinity. It was a combination of 3 3-star heroes. And they were Elson, this doofus right here. Vicarus, not even Captain Vicarus, just normal Vicarus. And Fire Tierria. So, back in the day, if you had these 3 heroes, you could basically do all the content in the game. All 3 of them got nerfed. I don't exactly remember what all the nerfs were. I know, like, Elson's buff, whatever, got nerfed, and Tierria got hit the hardest. So I do remember Tierria used to have a defense break on her S3, and that the CR she gave, I think, was greater, and she gave it to herself also. Something like that. Her base speed was also hit, so she also used to be faster than this, if I recall correctly. So they were all hit pretty hard. Another pretty early buff that happened was the Tamarin buff. So right now, Tamarin is seen as one of the best, if not the best, Soul Weaver for PvE content in the game. For about a week, that wasn't the case. Because when she came out, she was pretty much unusable. She didn't CR boost with her S3, I believe. And there was some other, like, weird things that she didn't do. The biggest thing was that in between stages, or like in between battles, her idle form would reset its cooldown all the way back to like the max turns. So if you were like farming a stage with her, you would never idle form. If you're doing like Abyss, you would not be able to save the idle form for the second part of the stage. If you're doing a raid, well, she would never idle form because you would finish the battle and then the game would not save the progress, right? If you're doing, say, a hunt, well, you would do the first part of the hunt and then go back to like its max, 8 turns, right? For the wyvern or whatever you're fighting at the time. So she was really bad when she came out. But she got buffed while her banner was actually still active. And it marks what I believe is the fastest buff that the game has ever had. Just like think about how long things take now. Like this was an immediate decision, basically. That's how bad she was. Another buff that happened. And yes, this is a buff. I don't know if I went here. Is you might not know this, but Arbiter Vildred used to suck. He used to suck so much. He used to be considered the worst ML5 in the game. So we got a buff. And what the buff did was he did all of this, but he got an attack buff when he revived. So like, just imagine like an Arbiter Vildred that got a mini gab 100% of the time. And that's what he had. It's because of this, like, how good he was at the time, why units like Lilibet and Singelica and stuff exist now. Because before that, nobody really cared about reviving besides Ruel. Right? Like, Arby wasn't a problem. Even, like, Maid Chloe was, she was still a strong unit back then, but she wasn't seeing a tremendous amount of play in comparison to some other units in the game. But when this happened, my god, you either had an answer to Arby or you just lost. This also happened around the same time that JP launched, and I know it had a lot of effect on the launch of that game over there, because when it happened, Lilibet wasn't in the game yet, so there was literally like 0 real Arbiter Villager counters that they could pull, so the meta was just re-rolling for Arbiter Vildred. And obviously, of course, units like Basar got a gazillion buffs over time, dating all the way back, I believe, to like late 2018, early 2019, where the biggest one being the ignore resistant soul burn on the S3. But that's really it for that list of nerfs and buffs. Let's go on to the next thing, which is going to be pets. So here are our pets. They are very nice, cute little thingies. Now, this is like, I say pets are what, a year and a half, something like that now. Maybe a little bit newer than that. It's not really the pets in general that are the big change. Because, like, if it was just, getting some, like, bonuses here, like, extra stuff, that's whatever. It's nice, but it's whatever. No. The big change about pets is... Where can I see it here? Okay, I don't okay, they don't show. Oh, here we go. Oh, did it not show the thing? Okay, I can't find it here. But if you don't know, the star level of your pet is how many times 5 you can repeat a stage automatically. So a 4-star pet, which is the max right now, you can auto a stage 20 times in a row. Before pets came out, you had to manually click every time you wanted to redo a stage. And it was very tedious. I don't think anybody misses doing it that way. And even for a time with pets, there's this dumb system with there are pet snacks, an item that's no longer in the game. Where so not this pet food, right? Which you feed to your pets. There were pet snacks which you needed to use to repeat battles. And everybody hated them. For one thing, the pet snacks, they took up a spot in your drop table. So instead of getting other things, you could get a friggin' pet snack and nobody liked them. But thankfully that was changed and now we have repeat battles in the game, which is something I think everybody wanted. But let's move on to another change that happened, which will be the Adventurer's Path, which I have finished on this account, so I can't actually show it to you. But if you have it on your account, it's gonna be this little icon right here, and there'll be a bunch of quests and everything you can do. What Adventurer's Path really changed how people play the early game, because it gave them enough gear and other stuff for them to basically not do some of the dumb stuff that older players had to do. One of the really dumb things we had to do before Adventurer's Path was we go to the freaking Garo here, right?
Why don't you test your
We
luck?
find them, and we would look for at the time, way back in the day, it was every 70 gear, right? You would look for a piece of gear, right? So let's say I needed
Money for information?
a ring.
information
Pretend this
for
is
money,
a 70 ring,
Whichever you prefer.
right? Oh, it has attack percentage and something like that, right? You might have to buy this. Just so we can do
Hey, why don't you
Wyvern
buy
10.
something? Come and take a
Or
look.
get a unit geared up for Wyvern 11 or whatever. Or you would buy green or even gray boots if they were speed
Hey, why
main.
don't you buy something? Come
Just
take a look.
because there was no free gear that was given out.
Soon.
Adventurer's Path, it even gave a lot of materials, and at the time the Alchemist Steeple didn't exist either. So even if you beat Wyvern 7, you couldn't do this, right? To get lucky with some gear. So you basically, the only thing you had was gear from Adventure Mode, from Labyrinth, and at the time, buying the 67 gear from normal raid was all you had, and it was actually pretty good. And everybody bought that gear at the time. Back then, Nick Seed 4 and 5 didn't exist yet. So you didn't have that 78 destruction gear that you got from those later stages. And you just had to buy gray gear and green gear from the shop. And everybody did it.
I'll see you later.
Alright, another change that happened, I think was pretty important, is Guild Wars. So you might not know this, but Guild Wars was not always in the game. It released, we're right here, end of January 2019. So about 3 months or so after, 3 to 4 months after global launch, and about 5 to 6 after KR launch. Some various things in Guild Wars have changed over time. It's pretty much like the structure here is still the same. And Guild Wars themselves didn't really change too much in-game. It did a lot more for the community aspect of the game, where before Guild Wars happened, like, guilds didn't really communicate that much with each other outside of like a few of them. Now there's like a lot more back and forth between like guild members and stuff like that. Next up, we're gonna have the next set of buffs and nerfs, and there will be nerfs this time. Only nerfs. And you know what I'm gonna talk about if you've been around for a while. It is the ML5 nerf train. So, like I said, Arbiter Vildred got his nerf. His attack buff from his revive was taken away, and that's what he's like right now. Silverblade Araminta got a nerf. I don't remember what it was. At the time, when she got her nerf, people actually thought that the meta had shifted enough away from her where she didn't really deserve it anymore. But she got hit anyway. Sage Ball also got a nerf back then. Things like his, what do you call it? His S2 used to strip 2 buffs instead of 1. He basically got like kind of, his S3 got reworked. His S3 used to be a awful skill, and now it's a really good skill. But when he stripped 2 buffs, that was like way too good. Also, I believe his CR increase might have been a little bit higher too. Not sure about that. Not positive about that one. But when he was a new hero, he was very oppressive in the game. The other nerf that happened that I think people forget about is the Carmen nerf, where look at this skill right here, right? This goes to a max of 15%, right? Damage reduction from critical hits. You know what it used to be? It used to be 30%. It used to go to 30% damage reduction from critical hits. Do you know, like, how insane that is? Oh, this also, the immunity used to be for 3 turns, which is also insane to think about. A fun fact, before Carmen was nerfed, FCC saw like no play at all. It wasn't until after her nerf happened that people started using FCC. They can never change it back, right? Like 30% would be way too good on like a passive right here, right now. But it was just these nerfs and buffs that happened, you know, I would mix these in with like the other ones. No. This set of nerfs and buffs had pretty far-reaching implications in the game, mainly because they issued 5-star selected tickets with this set of buffs. So, if, what do you call it, you had Sage Ball, Emelera, or Arbiter Vildred, you could trade them in for another MO 5-star of your choice. And a lot of people did that. And this is like around the time, like the start of, I say when people were getting like kind of dissatisfied with the game state overall, and it would eventually snowball into stuff like, well, some other changes we'll talk about a little bit later on the list. But let's move on to the next thing, and that will be about heroes. And heroes, you might not use a lot, and that is some of these 3-star heroes. And that would be Stigma. So, for a long time, 3-star heroes still had to use Molagores. Now they don't. Now they use Stigma. But it wasn't always the case, and because of this, not a lot of people raised 3 stars. It seemed to be something that like you did for like a meme, or like just really liked the character. Like I remember one of my first accounts, like Lumi Rain, let me find her here, was always one of my favorite characters. So I have her at like plus 15, right? You know, and at the time when I did it, it was from like Molagores, right? But after the change happened, you know, you got a refund for the Molagores you spent, stuff like that. It really opened up at least ways to experiment with 3 stars. Now, did it make 3 stars viable? You know, not really. But it did mean that the ease of people building stuff like, say, Falcon and Clary, right, became a lot more apparent. But speaking about heroes, another change that happened, which I think was pretty big, was the 4 and 5-star hero stat increase. This happened pretty early in the game. This happened mid-December of 2018. And just to recap, 5-star heroes got a 5%, got a 6% stat increase, and 4 stars got a 3% stat increase. This basically widened the gap between those heroes stat-wise and 3 stars. 3 stars started to see a pretty big drop-off, unless they were like very specialized after this change. And it's really hard to like notice how impactful I think this was overall, because for a lot of players, this is how the game has always been like this stat spread between the units. But just imagine if this never happened. How many 3 stars do you think would be all of a sudden viable because their base stats are like a lot closer to 5-star heroes? Because like there are like 3-star heroes that have good, like decent kits, and just because their stats suck so much, you just can't use them because gearing them is just too difficult at the moment. You saw the preview here though. Another change that happened, and I'll mix this in with another one, is stat improvements and enhancements. This happened in like 2 parts. So this is the earliest one. This happened in March of 2019. So a few interesting things here. One is that they buffed the main stat on all gear, so left and right side. So all of the main stats got increased for some reason. Another important thing to note is that this line here, the items of the stats as acquired prior to this update will not be changed. That was later reverted, and they later went back and they retroactively changed all the gear. This is the first time, I think, in the game's history where there was like a massive backlash over a decision that Smilegate made. Maybe the Tamarind one, I actually don't remember which one came first, but this is one of the first times I remember that people were like not happy. The other thing here is that this is something I think people forget happened too, where the order that you got your substats on gear changed. So epic gear stayed the same. The important one was heroic gear, where now you get a plus 12, but back then you got it on your first roll, so you saw what your full substat was immediately. And I do think this fundamentally changed how we roll our gear now. Like back then too, people would still roll blue gear, right? Like the game has changed to a point where now all blue gear is bad. But back then, when this change happened, blue gear was something that you would actually use occasionally. Another change that happened too, you might know that flat stats were also buffed. I don't know, that happened much later, but that basically meant that some flat stats were like not awful anymore. So but let's move on to the next change, and that would be something that's to do with summoning, and that would be the pity system. You don't know, this right here, and this right here, and this right here, well, that wasn't always in the game. The pity system was a result of one of like the most largest like periods of discontent the community had ever had with the game. So, and again, it all started with like the ML Ball, ML Era, RB situation, right? Like before that, you could pull on the banner like hundreds of times and not get the hero. And it was like, you know, pretty. It was pretty bad, right? So when the pity system happened, it was pretty noticeable that more and more players were getting like more heroes, and that people having like large collections of units wasn't rare anymore. On top of that, because of ML5s in Covenant and other things like that too, and Mystic Pity, the number of players who were getting Moonlight 5 stars was a lot higher too. So now it's like back then, like before this happened, if you had like 2 or 3 ML5s, you were rolling. Now my alt account has like 8, right? And I barely play my alt account. So, definitely changed the shape and outlook of the game there. But the number one change, I believe, that has happened in the game overall is the addition to World Arena.
Will you play with me, Meow?
World Arena made us fundamentally change how we build certain units. It changed what units we do build. On top of that, it also changed the types of units that Smilegate pushes out for Epic 7. A lot of units will specifically be for like PvP or like World Arena counters, stuff like that. It's done other things too, like it's basically killed normal arena. Basically, now it's an afterthought. But if you look at like, move this over here, some of the recent banners that have happened. So let me see. So World Arena opened I wish these were like dated like with year. I think it opened like here. Right? Like in this right here is when World Arena opened up overall, and things like, you know, Alencia, who, by the way, people didn't think Alencia was going to be good, but like Alencia, Bazaar, you see units like Cerise come out, right? Like they start pushing out Rowana to counter things like SSB. They're pushing out, you know, Guilty Gear again for the collab. Units like a bunch of repeats happen, but then like Celine for Anti-Cleave comes out. And then they really start like pushing counters. So Holiday Euphine, Shu was supposed to like push like the Bruiser meant a little bit more. It didn't really work out that way. Right? Like Landy, Irvalin. So you know, and now you have the Mystic banners too, right? Where you got things like, you know. And interestingly enough, a lot of these heroes, when they came out, weren't that good. Like, A-Tywin sucked, T-Siren sucked, LQC wasn't that good, right? And because of buffs that happened, they all became more viable. But now you definitely see that with units like ADS, designed a little bit, Sigrid, you know, Luluka, that they're really pushing, you know, let's try to crowd, that they're really pushing units that were good, in like the current meta, or that were good at fighting the current meta. And those are things I don't think would happen unless RTA was a thing. So RTA has definitely had a huge impact on the way that characters are designed as far as the kit goes. On top of that, RTA has had a lot of community implications too. Like, streamers will run tournaments. They're like lobbies, people talk about strategy, stuff like that. So it did a lot of good too for just making people talk to each other about the game and stuff like that. It also gave a lot of people more content. Like, I don't even RTA a lot on stream. Like, I say that, like, you know, I say that when I have almost 1,200 fights right now this season. But a lot of these I do off stream, right? And It's just something to do to like spend the time, whether or not you want to, mauled and try to get the legend, or just play casually and only get the masters for the skin. That's up to you. But it did add a lot of added value and longevity to the game, I believe. Of course, there is the Epic 7 World Championship that's coming up soon-ish. So, anyway, that is the list. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm Wild Neptune. Catch me at Twitch at twitch.tv/WildNeptune. Been a good one. Nep out.